Beating a Dead Discourse. As always, I am your discourse, Sean McKinda.
What kind of gamer are you? New School, Fortnite, PUBG, Clash of Clans, Far Cry 5, Overwatch, Old School, Modern Warfare 2, League of Legends, Angry Birds, Black Ops 2, BioShock Infinite, Ancient Gamer, Halo 3, Gears of War, Call of Duty 4, Fallout 3, Portal. Whether young or old, brand new or classic, we are all gamers. We snipe our enemies, complete our quests, and most of all, we get shit done. I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't mess with us.
Okay, so I don't want to do this episode, and that's the episode. We're done. That was it. We're done here.
Wait, no, Sean, come back.
As an aside, I do really like that I could hear you actively reading it, because whenever you would look away, it would go, and we are doing things, and like you could hear the face turn away from the microphone. It was very nice.
I mean, I think that added to the effect more than anything. I needed my script. I needed to make sure that I did that juicy meme justice. Oh, beautiful. So if you could tell, we're talking about the Joker this week.
I really don't want to. All right, listen. I'm gonna be just perfectly honest with you. Just off the get-go. This is gonna be an episode. We're gonna definitely talk about the movie, but obviously we're gonna talk about the fucking discourse around it. And here's my review of the movie. The movie is not good enough to warrant the discourse. The movie is boring, uninteresting, and forgettable. I will not think about this movie after we're done here today. I can't even put the words, man. I am exhausted already. We are like 3 minutes into this recording, and oh god, fuck this. I'm so upset that we're doing this.
Well, Sean, meanwhile, I thought the movie was great. I really, really liked it.
And this is not a joke. We need to put this out here front and center, because that saying, meanwhile, I really liked it, sounds like the fucking setup to a joke. Like, you know, I'm like, wow, I'm really down on it. Meanwhile, I loved it. Just kidding. No.
I mean, yeah, I'm being totally serious. I thought it had a great central performance by Joaquin Phoenix. I thought that, the
more like wacky Phoenix, am I right?
Am I right, fellow gamers? I thought that the themes and the portrayals of like mental illness and terrorism and mass murder, I thought were handled with surprising complexity and grace. I thought that it was not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination. There were lots of faults, which we will also get into. But yeah, overall, I found it very interesting. I thought that, you know, the best elements of the movie were Joaquin Phoenix's performance and his character. And since the vast majority of the movie is just about him, often like by himself, it made for very, very compelling cinema. So that's, I mean, I would highly recommend it. I was not expecting to enjoy this as much as I did when I had heard that the director of The Hangover was in charge of this. That really lowered my expectations. And as I had mentioned in our Dark Knight episode, I'm like, you know, well, how are you ever gonna even come within spitting distance of Heath Ledger, you know, and what he did with that character? But the character is different enough where I think it's worth comparing them as far as like the philosophy of the characters and, you know, how they kind of came to be, and, you know, we'll get into all that. But as far as like performances, you know, it's different enough that I didn't spend the whole time thinking about like, oh, like, is this version of the character as good as the Heath Ledger one? They're very different. So yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised. I was not expecting to enjoy this as much as I did.
I mean, I feel like I should probably kind of say something more than just I thought it was boring. Because I mean, obviously there's more to be said. I do have to say, unsurprisingly, Joaquin Phoenix delivers a really good performance. He is an incredibly talented actor and does some very very interesting good work in this film. It's just unfortunate that the character he is acting is not that interesting. Outside of that, I think the big takeaway for me is that, and like, there's a non-zero chance that this is the case. But the movie would have been better if it wasn't about the Joker. If this was a movie about someone else going down this path, I think I genuinely might have liked it more. But attaching the Joker name to it, even though it's not your conventional Joker, it just made me care less about it. Because the Joker, this is not really a new thing in the Joker's story. Like, this is just kind of more Joker to me. And like the fact that it has to be tied in with Batman and the Waynes, which we'll talk about later, really is bad. It's bad. It's not good. It's bad. And I think just the fact that it is factually a movie about the Joker and not just someone in this similar situation is a poor decision.
So the Joker as a character, I mean, I can definitely agree that the Joker as a character is pretty played out at this point. I think that the fact that they trotted out Jared Leto doing his thing was as good a sign of that as any. I think that this version of the character, you know, and I'm not familiar with the comics like you are, but you know, from all the other versions of the Joker that I've seen, from like the Dark Knight and the Arkham games, you know, the animated series, all that stuff, this version was different enough for me to still be interesting. I think there are a lot of fundamental differences, very un-Joker-like things about him that made him enough of an interesting character for me to go along with it, and just his performance, and like, you know, when he finally, like, I really like how he looks when he finally goes full Joker. You know, it takes like the whole movie, but it's a pretty good payoff. Yeah, so I'm sympathetic to the feeling of exhaustion surrounding the Joker. Like, I remember I felt like that before. But this was enough of a fresh take for me to get over some of that Joker malaise.
Am I feeling about Joker the way you feel about Marvel movies?
Quite possibly.
I'm just done. I cannot be asked to care about one of these movies. I'm just tired of, like, I'm an agent of chaos for chaos's sake. That's, oh god, it's so fucking boring. God.
Well, why don't we get into it? Why don't we get into spoilers? Because generally I agree. And that's one of the reasons that, like, after watching The Dark Knight, like, I felt for a long time, like, can we just be done with the Joker now? Like, you are not going to make a version of this character that is as good as what he did with it. Like, that's generally been my feeling for a while now. I won't say immediately after that. Like, I quite enjoyed the Joker in Arkham City. Like, I quite enjoyed that game. But, you know, slowly after that, I've been feeling more and more that way because, yeah, like, just, you know, Agent of Chaos, you know, or Herpader, we live in a society, like, all that stuff.
Well, I mean, just in defense of, like, the Arkham games, and to a further extent, like, in general, Mark Hamill's performances as the Joker in his various media, he's not so much an agent of chaos in those. He's much more of just a comic book villain who operates in the realm of chaos, which is a very different thing.
Right. Yeah, no, it's much more like, if you think about his plan in Arkham City, like, it's pretty... It's pretty self-absorbed. Like, he literally, like, and I mean, this isn't a spoiler for that game, even though it's old, because this is basically the premise, is that he's like, all right, Batman, I'm dying of, like, leukemia because I drank too much Bane juice in the last game. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give you leukemia, and if you don't do my dirty work for me, I'm gonna, have all of my blood sent to other hospitals to give the entire city leukemia. But I'll stop it if you can, if you can find the cure, Batman, then obviously you can cure everyone, and it's now in our mutual self-interest. So that's a very, like, Joker, classical Joker plan. But you're right in that it's not like the, Agent of Chaos interpretation. It's much more so like, I'm a comic book villain. This is my special relationship, with my boyfriend Batman, that sort of thing.
God, listening to you talk about that, like, I've been sitting here, like, with just, like, this heavy weight all over me. Just like, God, this is going to be about discourse and just more Joker shit. And then as you're talking about that Joker, I'm like, the weight, it's rising up. I remember why I liked this character. I remember things, and then then we're getting back into Chaos Joker, and it's coming back.
Well, and so that's the thing that, like, I think I'm starting to realize, and that I think that it's Rick and Morty syndrome. It's so much less like a lot of what we've actually seen from the character. Which, to be fair, like, the other, like, major appearance aside, like, non-comic major appearance aside from the Arkham games that we've seen, has been Jared Leto, who was very clearly, like, I haven't even seen Suicide Squad, but, like, you could tell just by the fact he's in it for, like, 10 minutes is very clearly just, like, shoehorned in.
Yeah, he is not in that movie. Like, I don't consider that to be a Joker appearance, despite the fact that he is the Joker in that movie.
Right, and so, like, I think that, I really do think it's kind of a Rick and Morty scenario where, like, it's less any particular interpretation of the character and more the people, jumping on the counter at McDonald's screaming about how they're not getting their Szechuan sauce,
No, I mean, I think you're right, which is why, like, when you were talking, because, like, those people are the ones who are yelling about, oh, yeah, he's an agent of chaos, he doesn't care, you want to know how I got these scars, baby? Like, that's so done at this point, that, like, any sort of, like, more goofy, like, even the goofy, lighter Jokers are still dark and terrifying, but not in the same, just... I don't know. I think part of it too is I'm like, I want my Joker to be escapism still, and, like, no one's just letting him be escapism anymore. It has to be real world parallels. And, like, once again, I'm not gonna say that, like, the comic books don't have those real world parallels, but those are more draped in metaphor and allegory rather than being like, look, this person could actually exist, and he's your neighbor.
Well, I am a psychopath who very much likes his real world parallels in these kind of movies. So maybe it makes sense that I quite enjoyed this where you didn't. In fact, one of the things I find, if we're talking about our opinions on comic book movies, one of the things I find continually frustrating is the lack of any sort of real world parallels, or how Marvel tends to bungle real world parallels. Like, I think that the most interesting stuff in, like, my favorite Marvel movie is, like, Black Panther, Iron Man 3, are where they have, like, more applicable, like, real world issues and themes. And where a lot of my frustrations come in, I mean, you can go back as far as our Civil War episode, is where I'm like, no, stop, go back to themes, go back to, the real world. I don't want to deal with Bucky Barnes. So that probably plays a big part in it, honestly.
And I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I don't disagree with you, because, like, there's a way to do this where you have still superhero movies that are light and fun, a la, Black Panther, and don't end in some giant rhino riding, elephant fighting nonsense, a la Black Panther.
There's a line there that you can definitely manage to make, and I think that this is, like, I think Marvel has been getting slightly better about this, like, as they've gone on, and so maybe there's hope there, because that was always the criticism of, like, Man of Steel, right? Is that it's just so relentlessly dour and sad, and it tries to have all these real world parallels, but they aren't even clever or, like, valid. So there's definitely, I think there's definitely middle ground to be reached that hasn't really. I mean, shit. I mean, I'd put like the Sam Raimi movies in that middle ground. Like those are very fun, but they're
Actually, yeah.
or
They don't end in big explosive showdowns. They end in very personal showdowns.
or even like I know it's become a little more popular to shit on this, but like X2, I think that movie holds up very well and has some real world like applicability stuff when it comes to like LGBT.
I kind of like
themes.
X3.
I kind of like X3 too. I'm not gonna lie, but. Yeah, and even so, like that movie's a little more serious and dour and not as unapologetically like comic booky as the Raimi movies are, but there's still like some fun stuff. So yeah, I think we need that Thanos snap on our comic book movies to make things perfectly balanced as all things should be. But I kept forgetting this was a comic book movie, so I'm fine with that. So that's why I enjoyed this, because I'm a sad boy.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I really wanted to watch Taxi Driver before we watched this movie, and I ran out of time to do so. So we have some things in the pipeline that might start happening, and ideally what I want to do is I want to watch it and then maybe do it for that. I don't want to say too much about it right now because I don't know for sure that it's going to happen. We're going to see how it goes. Just keep an eye on our Twitter, actually, for once in your life, because we don't post there a lot. Well, no, I don't post on that ever.
Oh,
so, like, I'm just saying, like, all of a sudden, I might start posting more there. But, yeah, no, because, like, this movie's clearly influenced by Taxi Driver. Like, I've done a ton of reading about this, and people are like, well, I mean, fuck, even Robert De Niro's in this movie. It's clearly, like, referencing and homaging Taxi Driver in a ton of ways.
Yeah, they've been pretty open about that in interviews, too. There's another Scorsese movie that they said they pulled a lot from. And for the record, I have not seen Taxi Driver either. So I know that that's one of the big criticisms of the movie is that it's just an inferior Taxi Driver, which very well may be true. This has happened before where I will watch a movie and be like, well, shit, that was just a better version of that. So maybe that's a caveat, but I also intended to watch Taxi Driver, not necessarily right before this because it hasn't been on my mind, but it's just been on my to-do list. So yeah, big old caveat there.
So yeah, I'll probably watch it within the next couple days when I'm not watching anime movies for the goddamn fucking bonus episode this month.
Well, are we getting into spoilers?
Let's talk about spoilers, but before we do, we're actually going to be watching a classic for next week. We got a sequel to it of sorts coming up in about a couple weeks here, but we want to get a little bit ahead of the curve because we've got a busy schedule coming up here. So we're going to be watching The Shining.
And we're also going to be watching The Shining because I have never watched it. I've read the book. I've read the original book, but from what I understand, that's very, very different from the Kubrick version. So I'm very excited. It's going to be a good one.
I cannot believe this. I keep forgetting that you have seen 2001 from Kubrick, and that's it.
No, yeah, that's 2001 was the only Kubrick movie I had seen. Before we started this podcast, I had not seen a single Kubrick film.
So that's going to be an interesting experience. I'm very excited. I've been meaning to rewatch it for a while now. So come back next week for that. It's going to be less discourse and more fascinating story stuff. So let's, for now, we're getting into spoilers. I want to talk about story stuff before we talk about discourse stuff, because discourse stuff is what's going to just take up the rest of it.
Yes, although to be fair, I think that the story stuff is very much tied up in a lot of the discourse stuff, which is maybe what I found interesting about the movie.
Well, then let me get my 3 small pieces, just rapid fire, boom, boom, boom off, and then I'm going to let you just take the reins, and I'm going to go, watch some YouTube videos or something while you talk.
Well, I'll get my pulpit ready.
So, outside of the movie just being generally boring for me, I have 3 kind of main points that I want to talk about. 3 main things that kind of got under my skin. 2 of which are kind of similar, just in kind of how they're structured, and then the last one is just kind of a weird way the movie ends. So first, I want to talk about the scene where Joker is in the car after he has shot Robert De Niro in the head in his whole movie theater setup. And I immediately, before we started recording this, I saw this on fucking Twitter. But I'm gonna defend the hell out of it. Because at one point he is in the car, leaning against the window, and it looks almost identical to the scene from the Jared Leto Joker, Heath Ledger Joker, sticking his head out the window in The Dark Knight. And people were in the comments of this tweet like, "Hey, look, there's a decent reference here." Everyone's like, "Wow, look, it's the same thing. It's the clown leaning his head against a window, like someone does that." And like, yes, if that was all it was, fine. The problem is that it is not just that. It goes well beyond that, in that it is a matter of how the shot is constructed. Because both are shot at kind of low angles, just a little bit underneath the line of the window, the bottom of the window, with a slight angle up to kind of get that visuals into the car. To me, it always kind of felt like the cameras were basically like stapled onto the rear view mirrors, the side view mirrors. And they're driving down this street lined with cars and fire and shit, much like in the other one. So like, to me, I'm just like, all right, this is the most clear parallel ever put on film. It felt very much in the same vein, and it's not just because it both involved clown against window. It is way beyond that, involving shot construction and how the scene is set up and the context of the things happening around it. It's very similar. And it's the one thing that made me remember that I'm watching a Joker movie and not just some movie about a guy who puts on clown makeup and kills people.
The John Wayne Gacy movie.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I want to talk about
Wait, before you move on, side note, I just want to tell everyone in the audience that in our pre-discussion, Sean had the most beautiful Hulk rage moment against this shot, and I dearly wish that you could have heard it. I feel like I've been blessed by this universe for having been the only man alive who will ever be able to hear that rant about the shot. So I just wanted to brag.
You never read Twitter comments, and I read Twitter comments, and they made me very, very mad, because people were like, "Well, yeah, no, duh, just a clown against the window. Ha ha! You're so smart, cinema guys." And I'm like, no, shut the fuck up. All right, you're missing the other half of the context here. Goddamn clods.
I'm just playing Emperor Palpatine to Sean's Anakin this week.
Just riling me up.
Yeah.
Send me to the younglings. Send me to the younglings.
Good, Sean. Good. All right. Move on to your next real point.
My next real point is just along the same lines of like clear homages to other things, and also why this movie should not have been about the Joker but have been about something else. Because the Batman tie-in is tenuous and bad and heavy-handed and ham-fisted and forced in, and more things that mean the same thing that I'm just going to continue to repeat down the list by saying "and" after. It fucking sucks. And there is no clearer indication of this than when Bruce, Martha, and Daddy Wayne, whose name I'm forgetting.
Thomas, he was the most important of the three in the movie.
You think listen, I know, but also I did not give a shit about the Waynes in this movie at all. They were clearly ham-fisted in. They did not matter, really. They let me rephrase that. They mattered to the context of the story, but not because they were Waynes, but because of who they were within the context of the movie. If that makes sense.
Yes.
So like the fact that it's Thomas Wayne, I that doesn't matter to me. But they go down the fucking crime alley, and it's the most. Close your eyes. Imagine the crime alley scene. Yeah, it's that. You got it. You nailed it in one. Congratulations. That's what it looks like. Like it's got like the exploding pearls and the dad getting shot and the Bruce watching, and it looks like every other version of this ever recorded. And I was thinking about it because I was talking to Sam, the girlfriend, about it a little bit. And I'm like, hey, this is dumb and bad. She's like, oh my God, it's like, you know, how they have to have Peter Parker's uncle Ben get shot in every movie. And I'm like, kind of. But in those movies, like Uncle Ben's death is usually at least slightly different. Like I want to say in Amazing, it was a home invader.
In Amazing Spider-Man, I remember that Uncle Ben got shot because Peter Parker wanted chocolate milk and let him rob the convenience store.
Holy fuck.
People were memeing about that for a while, yeah, but sorry, go on.
No, I mean, I'm happy you got more context to it because that helps explain, like, in Raimi's Spider-Man, he gets shot outside of the library waiting for Peter, and, like, Peter, it's a similar idea, but, like, Peter is a little bit more just being a vindictive asshole about, like, winnings and whatnot. It's the same end result, but it's different settings, which makes it, yes, the same thing, but feel a little bit different based on the movie you're watching. This is literally, I'm not kidding. When you close your eyes and imagine the shooting of Thomas and Martha Wayne, congratulations, you got it right. It's just that. So it fucking sucked.
Yeah, so regarding the Waynes, while we're talking about it, I do agree that this is some of the weaker stuff in the film. Like I said, even though I enjoyed the movie quite a bit, I don't think it's by any means perfect, and a lot of that is stuff basically when we're not surrounding the Joker himself. So like the stuff with Thomas Wayne, like I see what they're going for, and it's maybe potentially an interesting idea of like reframing the Wayne family as like, just sort of rich corporate assholes. But it doesn't really go anywhere, especially since we know this isn't like, that's maybe the kind of angle that would actually be interesting in a theoretically decent like Batman versus Superman or something, where you kind of want to, twist the things a little bit, but we know that this isn't really gonna go anywhere, and this is just sort of its own like standalone movie, so it doesn't really matter. And I think that just overall a lot of the stuff surrounding the like clowns rise up, gamers rise up stuff surrounding Thomas Wayne and his plot, like I think the movie overall is pretty smart with how it handles a lot of the social commentary. This is a big major exception that's really unfortunate. It feels really dated. Like that it seems to be using Joker Occupy Wall Street, which is like a decade ago. So that stuff, it feels really out of place, especially considering I think a lot of the more current stuff that the movie handles very, very well. So yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you on any of these points, is basically what I'm boiling it down to here.
So then, with your admission that this movie is in fact bad,
carry on.
I want to talk about the ending a little bit, which is, it feels like it's trying to be smart and clever, but is just being really, really dumb. Like it ends with Joker back in assuming Arkham. It's not strictly speaking clearly stated, but like it's a fair assumption that it's Arkham. And talking to a woman, and there's some kind of subtle acknowledgments that this whole movie might not have actually happened. Which I'm not necessarily against the dream ending. It's always kind of a weak thing to do, but like it felt especially weak here because it just kind of undoes a lot. Like it doesn't feel like a conclusion to a character beat at that point. And like if it's not a dream ending, it's still just kind of like he's the Joker, he's in Arkham, look at him go, Joaquin Phoenix.
Got him.
It's a weird, dumb, nothing of an ending.
Also agreed. I actually completely forgot about this ending bit at the asylum when Sean mentioned that he thought the ending was stupid. I was like, wait, what part? Because in my mind, if the movie had just like cut to black at that moment when the gamers rise up and they kind of like, take the Joker and like put him on the cop car and raise him in the crowd, like all that shit. I think if they had just done that, that's all you needed. You get the sense that he's going to go.
I genuinely think the movie would have been better for it.
100% agreed. You don't have to have like if you want to have the Waynes as to include that, just to round out the Batman stuff, you can have that shot of them like escaping the movie theater and going down the alley with like the guy sort of standing menacingly. Like I thought that's all it was gonna be, like because at that point the rest, like you were saying.
Yeah,
you don't need to see.
You don't.
So yeah, and so I think that's like that aspect, that last scene when the gamers rise up, I think that it's potent and relevant, but when it's the only time the sort of like broader social stuff ever feels like it's actually saying something. But yeah, like the stuff in the asylum, was it really a dream because he's crazy or whatever? Yeah, that was dumb bullshit. We didn't need that.
As an aside, when I saw they were leaving a movie called Zorro the Gay Blade, I chuckled to myself because my first thought was Zorro the Beyblade.
Zorro, let her rip.
And like, I'm like, Zorro the Gay Blade, haha, like Zorro the Beyblade. And I'm like, that was the stupidest thing I've ever laughed at myself about. I just laughed in the theater at that. That was nothing.
Did you get the stink eye from like a couple turning around thinking you were being homophobic, laughing at the Gay Blade?
No, because the worst part about it was I didn't even think about it until like I left the theater. I'm like, oh no, if somebody that might have looked bad. I was laughing at it because it sounds like Beyblade. Because I am 10, but not because I'm 10 like ha ha insult. More like 10 because ha ha toys.
Anime toys, no less. Oh god. Well, all right,
Jackson, it's your time. I'm gonna go check out. I don't want to be here anymore. I said my piece. I don't want to be in the discourse.
I'm proud of you, Sean. I'm here. I'm gonna get fiery because I feel a little bit of genuine anger about the discourse surrounding this movie. And I think that the movie movie itself plays into some of that. So little bit of review from Teacher Jackson. If you watched our Brightburn episode or listened to it, which you should, because we're great. You'll recall that I spent a good amount of time talking about how I was sort of interested in like serial killer psychology and like the causes of this kind of domestic terrorism that, of course, the discourse was so worried about. So I'll try not to belabor the point too much for people who listen to that episode, but to briefly review, I think that if you are like, for any reason, just out of like curiosity, if you're like worried about the state of the world, if you want to like try and be an activist for stopping the kind of horrible like domestic terrorism that happens in the United States, I think that you should study the Columbine massacre. I think it's very telling. And I have gone and done further research. I spent, not a super long amount of time, but spent some time reading about some of the other many, many terrible massacres the United States has had in the time since Columbine, and even some scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles about the connections between like mental health and violence, because that was another sort of big concern in the discourse, is that this movie was going to be ableist in the way that like, it's saying that anyone with mental health problems is more violent. We can get into all that, but generally speaking, one of the big takeaways from the Columbine massacre, because there were two perpetrators who I think broadly speaking, you can characterize a lot of these sort of people as. You have, you had Harris, who was very much like the mastermind behind the whole thing, very, very intelligent, very charismatic, what you might call a sociopath, even though I'm pretty sure that's not like actually a real like accepted term, whatever the case may be. So that's the sort of guy who plans these sort of things, and that's when people are like, he seemed like such a normal person, such a normal, affable guy. Like, I never would have understood this. And this is the sort of character that classically the Joker has been. This is our Heath Ledger. This is like really any, like, I believe, Sean, you would know comics better than me if you're still there.
Oh, I am. I'm listening. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Joking aside, I'm here.
No, I know. But like, I believe there's a comic where, like, they manage, it might be like Superman or Lex Luthor or somebody gets like a CAT scan of the Joker's brain. They have a machine that's going to be like, all right, we're going to find out what makes him tick. We're going to find out exactly like what makes him so crazy, and like find out his like plankton crazy percentage, basically. And they run the scan on him, and the answer is 0. Like, the Joker is completely sane and completely rational, which, that's not the only interpretation of the character, of course, but that actually makes a lot of sense. Like, particularly if you're thinking about the Heath Ledger version of the character, he very much fits that mold in that his ideology is monstrous, but nothing that he does is really that crazy or irrational. Like, again, very intelligent, very charismatic. He says he doesn't have a plan, but he very much has a plan to, sort of spread his ideology. Very, very calculating, sort of like mastermind type. So you have your Heath Ledger Joker. And then, again, referring to the real world events of the Columbine massacre, you had his partner Klebold, who was much more sort of like what they try to portray on the news as like mentally troubled, kind of misunderstood, like had anger issues, would like lash out at people, was on and off a bunch of different medications, that sort of thing. And so, Harris, the mastermind, kind of stoked and encouraged Klebold to, be part of this grand massacre to achieve their end goal, which I'll tie this all into a neat, horrific little bow at the end here because I think it's relevant to the movie. So that, historically speaking, you can say a lot of things about the Joker. Can't say that he's really been like a flunky, but I think that's what makes this version of the character so different, is that he fits that mold. And I think you find, if you look at a ton of the background of the killers in these real life massacres, usually they'll fit, generally speaking, one of these molds or the other. Like the Las Vegas shooter, if you read a little bit about him, didn't seem to have any particular plan, but he also didn't seem particularly unhinged. He just loved a lot of guns, was just sort of kept to himself, very intelligent, that sort of thing. But then if you look at like the Orlando nightclub shooter, that was a guy who was very troubled. There may have been like some internal grapplings with his sexuality and his religion and like other just sort of like disturbances within himself internally and externally that drove him to do that terrible, terrible thing. So all of that is to say that, based on all of my research, that if you are portraying this sort of character, I think that the movie does it incredibly well. Maybe better than like any movie that I've personally seen. Because it's, going back to sort of the link between, mental health problems and violence, the answer is not as clean one way or the other as the news would might lead you to believe. So yes, like people are correct when they say that like mental health isn't necessarily a predicator of violence. Like the person who's suffering from major depression and can barely get out of bed, that person's not going to be more violent than your average person. However, there are certain like mental health conditions, I believe, like per capita, people who suffer from some sort of schizophrenia are more likely to engage in this kind of violent behavior. People with personality disorders of different kinds are more likely to engage. So it's not as easy. For the first thing, it's not as easy to just say like, mental health issues as a whole cause people to be violent in one way or the other. But even within that, right? Like you can't even say like schizophrenia is more likely to make someone be violent because it's more complicated than that. Because there are, that's not the best, the best or like most notable like predictor of these sorts of things. But if you take a person who has some sort of, very serious condition like that, And you pair it with like substance abuse, you pair it with like, domestic abuse, family abuse, just overall like shitty life circumstances, all these kind of comorbid factors, right, are much more likely to drive people suffering from these sort of issues to commit these acts of violence. And that's, again, if we're talking about the discourse and real world violence, I was very interested to go and look at the Aurora shooting, because that had come up again, obviously, considering that happened at a Batman film, and of course the shooter was rumored to have modeled himself after the Joker. I think that's where a lot of the discourse had come from, and that turned out to not be true. I just want to say that pretty definitively in case you had thought that, because I had thought that until a couple of days ago.
Hey, leave me out of here.
Oh, I meant you as in the audience, not you, Sean. Yeah.
Oh.
You're a smarter boy than me. You probably realized that. I was, but in all seriousness, like, yes, the Joker stuff with the Aurora shooting, not true. The people just latched onto that because he had like bright neon hair, but that was a coincidence. Like he, I think like his ex who had been dating him at the time had said that like he had done that because his friend had dyed his hair blue and he wanted to do like a contrast thing and be kind of funny. So really had nothing to do with the Joker. But otherwise, like if you look at just generally doing a basic skim of what his life situation sounded like, it very much looks like Joaquin Phoenix's character here, struggling with a lot of, different mental issues, a lot of instability in his personal relationships, kind of slipping through the cracks, as it were. Like, this is a person, who maybe the system failed, who is of course a horrible murderer, but it's not like he got that way just because, there are people who in this world, the masterminds, the Heath Ledgers, so to speak, who will do that just because. But that's not always true. And I think what makes this movie so effective for me is how it really rides that line between demonstrating like what drives a troubled person to do these sorts of horrible things without ever condoning the things themselves. And like I think the cinematic language all throughout very sufficiently tense. Like the score is effective.
The score sounds like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star sometimes. Just as an aside, like I just want to talk about that for a hot second. Like I was listening to it and I'm like, because you go dun 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 dun, and I'm like, what the fuck?
I was not thinking of Twinkle Twinkle. I was thinking of like a video game song or something, but I guess that just shows you how diseased my mind is.
So like I wasn't a huge fan of the score because to me I just heard Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and that wasn't great with my serious Joker movie.
That's fair. But they did at least go, whether or not you thought the actual score was good, like it's not a situation like Nightcrawler where like the actual tone they try to strike is like horrendously inappropriate for what's going on. Like I remember Nightcrawler had like Birdemic sounding music. It was really distracting. But like, so yeah, or like even that scene, and I think people have been misinterpreting this, like as kind of a Gamers Rise Up moment, which is perhaps sort of inevitable with the material. You're always going to have people, if you ever try to show kind of a villainous character from a three-dimensional perspective, I think, again, it's a little bit inevitable that you're going to have people kind of get the wrong idea. And so, like, that scene where there's, like, the asshole, like, Wall Street guys, like, harassing that woman on the train, and they start, like, kicking the shit out of him. Like, you can read that as, like, the Joker breaking free from society's chains and gamers rising up or whatever. But it's really not played that way. Like, it's treated in a pretty terrifying manner. Like, he doesn't just like kill those guys in a fit of rage, which would be realistic. He like, you can tell that there's more, like there's something more going on here than just like a heat of the moment crime. Because like that last guy, when he gets away, just getting shot, he doesn't just like kill him. He like executes that guy. Like he chases him down, like pops in and out of cover like he's a fucking, Gears of War character, and unloads an entire clip into him as he screams. It's horrifying. A great scene. And so like that's the sort of thing, and I think all throughout the movie that like, yes, like you do feel bad for him when like things go wrong. Like it sucks that he doesn't have access to the resources that he should have, and like that maybe could have prevented all this, but like he is still a scary guy. And so I think that the movie does a really good job of writing that line, particularly with how, again, it really emphasizes those kind of comorbid factors, like, his kind of narcissistic, abusive mother, very common in these sorts of things, have some sort of history of abuse. It's not just that he has this, like, these delusions, maybe this, like, schizophrenia. It's that he, loses his job, all this other stuff happens, is just generally very isolated from society. And I think what I found like the most surprising and kind of subtle is that like I think the movie even acknowledges the role that like gun control plays in all of this, because like none of this could have happened if this guy didn't have a gun. And I think like, so one thing, I was kind of worried at the start that the movie was going to be like too schmaltzy and too much on his side when like, he's kind of down on his luck, and when, he gets beat by the sign, then his boss chews him out for like losing the sign or whatever. And I thought like, oh, he's going to get fired and that's going to be kind of corny, but he doesn't. That's just sort of the setup. What gets him fired is
quick aside. I just have to jump in here. Because yes, this is a little bit after you said this, but I've been kind of trying to figure out how I want to phrase this.
Sure.
The fact that the guys take his side and then kick the shit out of him was silly.
Yes, no, I mean, I don't think the movie starts off on the right foot either. I was kind of worried. I'm like, oh no, like, I don't know about this.
Like, taking his sign, sure, I can give that to him as, like, teenagers or something like that. And then even maybe whacking him with the sign and having it shatter, sure. But then when they go, beat him up, and then start kicking him while he's down, I'm like, no one acts like this. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, and that's kind of the stuff. And there are a few small things throughout the movie. Like I said,
okay, the amount of times people shout beat them up and kick someone while they're on the ground is ridiculous.
That is ridiculous. So there's stuff like that. I think that there's some visual corniness too, particularly surrounding the like occupied clown subplots. With when they just have like, cringy like newspaper headlines and like stuff kind of beating you over the head, that maybe undoes some of the more subtle work that they're doing. Like another scene that I really like as far as like, being kind of true to life and realistic, is that scene where the therapist tells him that like he's being cut loose. And I think that's a nice humanizing scene. And I think that's the scene where the movie started to pick up for me, because at the beginning, again, it was kind of corny. I was like, oh, he's got this therapist who doesn't really care. But in the second meeting they have, she's like really real with him, in a way like, hey, like, I'm sorry. Like our funding got cut. Like, I really am. You're not going to have access to your medicine anymore, but there's nothing I can do about it, and I'm not much better off than you. Like, these are just the circumstances. # we live in a society. But I think that moment of # we live in a society rang a lot more true when you do hear about, like, the appalling, like, lack of public health options, like, particularly here in the United States, particularly when it comes to mental health. And so that's the sort of thing where like that sort of sympathy for this sort of character felt a lot more appropriate and felt a lot more true to life without condoning the fact that he turns out to be the fucking Joker. So despite, some occasional moments of corniness and silliness, I think overall I was just on board with how they portrayed this character, with how they portrayed kind of his ultimate fall. I like how, again, it's not just one thing. It's like at any moment, or if something had gone just a little differently for this guy, this maybe could have been prevented if we had just a little bit more funding, if like things had just gone a little bit better, and if he didn't have a gun. I'm coming back to that. The fact that this is a man who clearly should not have access to firearms, and that he. Like, so it has his moments of sympathy, but he is ultimately responsible for his own undoing when he's having his performance at the children's hospital and just drops his gun. And and so he understandably gets fired, and he's completely responsible for that. And so, I really like that was a role in it. Like, that's, he doesn't have one of the things that's very un-Joker-like about him. He doesn't have these master plans and grand schemes. Mostly he just shoots people like a real, like, troubled, unhinged, like, domestic terrorist. And, so yeah, that stuff I thought was all good. And I think that coming back to the discourse, we're gonna end with the discourse. I'm sorry. Sorry.
We haven't even touched on the discourse yet.
Not really.
Oh my god, you've been talking for 20 minutes.
Well, this is my last bit. All right, we gotta hold our noses. We gotta wade into the garbage, and then we'll be done.
Listen, before we do, all I need you to do is admit that despite like the character works and like some of the themes work, the rest of the movie is bad. Just admit it, because you've said that so much at this point. Just admit that the rest of it is bad, and we can move on.
No.
Just admit it.
Jackson. There's so many great scenes. There's so many, like that whole scene.
My son. Shh. Beat him up.
No, the scene of the talk show is really tense and effective. Like his performance. No, it's great.
The performance is good. This movie is boring.
I didn't think I was never bored, really. Like, there were some parts that I thought were kind of cringy, but I wasn't really ever bored.
All right, whatever. You can continue to be wrong. I was trying to give you an out. All right,
I'm not giving this one to you. I'm gonna fight for my right to be a gamer. So this is maybe a bit of me kind of feeling like a fool and feeling like a sheep. Because I remember very distinctly, I've had a few conversations with people now, about, the movie, the fact that the military was like issuing warnings and everyone saying this is going to cause the incels to rise up and cause a bunch of shootings and violence. And obviously that hasn't happened yet.
The movie's not good enough to warrant it.
And so, like, in my own small little way, even though I was mostly annoyed by the discourse and tried to ignore it, when it did come up, I had sort of spread the misinformation of, well, like, it makes sense that there's this discourse, considering that the last time that someone shot up a movie theater, he did it in, invoking the Joker. Like, it makes sense. But that isn't true. I was perpetuating bullshit, a narrative that had just been repeated enough to the point where I thought that it was true. And I think that overall, a lot of the Thomas Wayne stuff and a lot of the We Live in a Society stuff doesn't work. I think that the last scene, everything involving, like, after he dresses up and goes to, like, the studio audience, and he has a little speech and he shoots Robert De Niro, I think that stuff was a lot more effective and could have been even more effective if they had handled the, Occupy clowns, whatever, with a bit more of a deft hand through the rest of the movie. Because, like, I'm thinking in particular of that shot after he shoots him that just slowly pans out and just shows all the monitors, with all of the, with all of the, like, various scenes throughout the moment, like breaking news, like Joker shoots this man on live TV, and the media, like, making a big fuss about it. Obviously couldn't help but think about the media making a big fuss about the movie itself. And it was then, like, to me, that moment where then there's, like, riots and, like, a Joker uprising, that felt a lot more believable to me than, Occupy Wall Street, clown makeup, whatever, throughout the rest of the movie. And bringing it back around to, like, real life tragedies, like, I think that the tendency is going to be to dismiss sort of this element of the movie, this, like, role that maybe the media plays in, maybe glamorizing or creating a narrative around these sort of shooters and domestic terrorists. A lot of people tend to dismiss that as, like, oh, of course people are talking about the media, man. But, like, the worst, I won't say the worst part about the Columbine Massacre, because a lot of people fucking died, but sort of the shit
that feels pretty bad.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. but the cherry on top of this shit cake, let's say, is that if you go and you read what Harris had written in his little manifesto about what he wanted out of this, he had said that he wanted to be famous. He had said that he wanted media attention, and that he wanted to be known as like him and his little lackey wanted to be like infamous killers, like they wanted to outdo like the Oklahoma City bombings. And the dark truth, the fact that I know his name, the fact that even after all these shootings, like, the Columbine tragedy is still like a touchstone. The fact that he did inspire like copycats and this whole discourse surrounding it, the sad truth of the matter is that he won. And the media had no small part in playing that, because it happens all the time with these tragedies. Misinformation spreads. There's irresponsible reporting, irresponsible punditry, and it all, gets blown up into this big old thing. And so I can't help but see those echoes and feel, again, partially directed at myself for helping to perpetuate misinformation, this sort of disdain for the whole frenzy, like, surrounding the Joker movie. Because in the end, like, we have a lot of problems. # we live in a society. But, like, when you sit down and think about it, what are a lot of the big problems that we're facing right now? If I had to rattle off a couple at the top of my head.
DLC, microtransactions,
loot boxes. So those are the big ones. But, on a slightly lower tier, we got stuff like, climate change. We got stuff like opioid crisis. We got stuff like the rise of fascism and the rise of white nationalism. So let's, we live in a society, so let's break it down, right? With regards to the Joker and sort of the scaremongering about the movie. So, white nationalism, the rise of fascism and the alt-right, definitely a problem. How much is that, like, can you really say, like, the Joker of all people would, like, or of all characters would exacerbate that, right? Because you think about white nationalism and you think about fascism, as an ideology, it's very much defined by, like, order and strength and unity and all that other bullshit. And that's not really, like, when we think about, like, your average, like, edgy person who's into the Joker, it's not really that sort of person, right? Like, so these things, I mean, I don't know, feel a little bit unrelated to me. Then you have the another big issue, of course, is the gun crisis, all these mass shootings that we have throughout America. And, maybe there's a bit more there, right? So you sit down and you think about it. Well, a lot of the shootings are suicides in America. A lot of the shootings are in, like, impoverished areas due to, like, gang violence and all these other, like, mitigating factors that aren't, quite the same as sort of the terrorism that the Joker would invoke, right? But even like, just looking at that, there's still, like, the fact that this is the only country where it happens obviously indicates that this is a gun problem, which it absolutely is. There's even from the, like, mental health standpoint, right? Because, people like to use that as sort of a cudgel to push back against, like, gun reform. But that's, even so, there's still something to that. It's been shown, when people don't get the help or the resources they need, and there's all these comorbid factors, kind of like we've been talking about. But even so, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, how much is, like, edgy teenagers wearing Heath Ledger shirts really a problem, Like, yeah, there are morons on the internet who idolize characters like Walter White and, like, Rick Sanchez and, like, the Joker. But, like, have we had a case where that has become something that wasn't idiotic, like, trashing McDonald's over Szechuan sauce? Like, I don't know. And so it seemed to hold a little bit more weight, right? When, we all thought that the Aurora shooter was inspired in part by the Joker. But that ended up being not true. that ended up just being like basically a rumor that just got a misunderstanding that just got repeated enough until people thought it was true. And so yeah, I mean, I guess just what I'm trying to say is that the whole discourse, all the scaremongering surrounding the movie, I mean, it really amounted to nothing, especially, like, I thought the movie was good, but like you've been saying, for, like, this movie of all things, like, it's not even that extreme. Yeah, so I find that the movie has this element of the media's role in perpetuating these sort of cycles of violence. I found that really poignant in light of the whole, like, frenzy surrounding the movie in the lead up to its release. And so maybe, we had talked before, like before the show started, about this, kind of the conspiracy angle of like the scaremongering being whipped up by the executives to generate buzz. I mean, it's certainly possible. That would be horrible if it were true. But who can say? Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a grand thesis beyond this, except that I found the discourse surrounding the movie to be full of misinformation and sort of half-truths and assumptions, and I found it upsetting. We need to do better, guys.
We need to do better, I think, is the good tagline for this movie, because we could have gotten a better movie, too.
Ayo!
I just want to jump in really quick. I'm not going to talk too long, because we're already at overtime, and, like, we've beaten the fucking discourse. I don't want to talk about the discourse. I've made this abundantly clear. And just kind of say that, yeah, I agree with most of what Jackson's saying. I think that a lot of this was overhyped and overblown and plays off fears and ideas that don't necessarily align with the ideas of this iteration of Joker. I think that there's an element of fear around just having a movie about Joker, given that the previous Joker of note was Heath Ledger, and he was just an agent of chaos, so I understand.
Of note, sorry. Continue.
So like I can understand why people would be worried about this, like people not fully understanding the context of the movie, just being like, Joker, dude, chaos, yeah. People are dumb. There's people on the internet that are gonna, take anything from literally anything, and like who fucking knows. So it's just it's a shit show that this movie didn't deserve, because this movie deserved nothing.
Oh, well, it may not get any Oscars, but it might get a horsey, which is the truest award of all.
If this movie gets a horsey, I quit.
Is this the end of our podcast? Find out in December.
For now, though, I've been Sean McKinda. I don't want to talk.
We're done. It's over. You don't have to worry about it anymore.
I'm on Twitter, Sean_McKinda. I'm on Twitch, Helpless_Skippy. I write for 25yearslatersite.com. I do a lot of gaming stuff for them, so go read that stuff. Jackson does things.
I sure do. I don't go on big old political rants on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller. We keep it fun there. We play Smash Bros. Come hang out. It'll be good. We'll all hold hands and kumbaya now that this Joker nonsense is behind us, at least until the horsies, when the podcast goes down in sound and fury.
If you want to keep in contact with the podcast and you want to kind of like, so we might have something coming up for you here a little bit later this week, you should go follow us at BADH_cast on Twitter. It's a great place to keep an update with what's going on. We'll let you know if anything new is coming out, anything new is happening. Definitely go do that. If you want to get into contact with us and yell at Jackson for his bad take about this movie, you can do so by joining our Discord. And to do that, all you need to do is give us $1 a month over at patreon.com/BADH_cast. At $5 a month, you get access to all our previous bonus episodes. They're all fucking straight up bangers. They're all real good. And this month we've got a new episode about the Persona 3 movies coming out in like a week. So stay tuned for that. And then at the $10 tier, you can request bonus episodes. If you got a certain movie you want us to watch, to suffer through, like Barbie and the Nutcracker or something like that, there's your opportunity. So
why would you encourage them like this? Why would you say that?
Listen, if you put that out there, like the initial thought is that people will request it, right? But like in this way, it's to be expected. So they're gonna have to come up with something different, right? Like
They're gonna have to come up with something worse.
like Barbie and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I mean, I guess we have already done an episode on the Star Wars Holiday Special, so truly, how much worse can it get?
Love on a Leash.
Oh.
You can get Love on a Leash worse. And anyway, at $10 tier, you also get a little bonus.
Get a little shout out from us here at the show. Thank you so much, Travis. Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you so much, Autumn Keller. And thank you so much, Summer Skaggs. Y'all are great. Thanks for keeping the lights on and shit.
And also thanks to Loads of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide Alternate Takeoff. The album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out, listen to them wherever you possibly can, support them in any way you can. They're great. You should also go support 25 Years Later site.com. There's a bunch of really talented people doing a bunch of really talented writing over there on literally everything you can think of. Wrestling, video games, movies, TV shows. They have interviews, news, reviews, analyses. That, I don't know why I said it that way, but you know what I mean. So you should go get all your news from them. They're fucking great people, way more talented than I am. So go read their stuff. Next week, we're going to be talking about The Shining. Thank God it's a movie that I actually want to talk about. So come back for that. Jackson, do you want to say a dumb Gamers Rise Up joke here?
You know I did, but you completely stole my thunder by undercutting me like that, so now I'm not going to.
Joker, baby. Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go